All right, for our second example, we're going to do 4x squared is less than or equal to 1 minus 2x. Okay, just like before, we have to get one of these sides to be 0. So again, my 4x squared is my highest power term. I'm going to keep that positive, so I'm going to move the 1 and the minus 2x. I'm going to get those to the left-hand side of this. So we're going to add 2x to both sides. So I have 4x squared plus 2x. And we're also going to subtract 1 from both sides to make the right side equal to 0. Couple of things to notice here. One is that the inequality has an equal to symbol under it. So this time we're actually going to have solid brackets, the squared off brackets where we put our solutions at the end. So we just have to make sure we pay attention to that. The other thing is, if you were to try to factor this one does not factor easily for us. As a matter of fact, it doesn't factor without using the quadratic formula. So we're actually going to have to go to the quadratic formula here in order to solve that one. I still suggest you try to factor these things first, but if you realize that it's just not working, quadratic formula always works. So in the quadratic formula, it says x is negative, here let's write the quadratic formula up here just as a reminder. It's negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so let's go ahead and use our values here. So b is 2, so negative b would be negative 2 plus or minus square root of b squared. I always put b in parentheses. I don't care if it's positive or negative. It's just safer. So 2 squared minus 4 times a times c. And I also put my a and my c in parentheses all the time. Doesn't matter if they're positive or negative. It's just going to save me from making any mistakes, especially if you use your calculator to plug these things into later. And then over 2a. And a was 4. All right, let's go ahead and simplify. So we always simplify under the root first. So 2 squared is 4. And then let's see, minus 4 times negative 1. So I get negative 4 times 4, which is negative 16, times negative 1, which is positive 16. So this is going to become plus 16. And then we can do the denominator. We can always do that one at any time. That's just 8. So let's simplify a little bit more. So negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 20 over 8. And while that technically is the correct answer, we're going to simplify it because the square root here does simplify. The square root of 4 goes into 20. So if we change that to be the square root of 4 times 5 over 8, we can then take the square root of 4 out to the front. The square root of 4 itself is 2. So I'm going to bring that up here. So negative 2 plus or minus 2, still have a square root of 5 left over 8. And then it looks like I can divide a 2 out of everything here, so I'm going to divide every one of these terms here by 2 just to simplify it one last step here. So it's going to be negative 1 plus or minus 1 square root of 5 over 4. Okay, I'm pretty sure that's probably going to be as simplified as I can get it. Now, if you don't have your calculator, that's really not going to help you unless you have a really good approximation of what these values are. So it's not a bad idea to go ahead and plug these things into your calculator. If you were to do the negative 1 plus the square root of 5 over 4, you're actually going to get approximately 0.3. And then if you were to do the negative 1 minus the square root of 5 over 4, you're actually going to get negative 0.8, I believe is what it is. And that gives us a really good approximation. So when we go to put these on our number line, and the answers with the square roots are the exact answers. So technically those are the ones we should be putting on the number line. But we're going to need the approximations just to be sure. So the negative 1 goes here. And the positive one with the plus root 5 goes here. Okay, now we have to test our regions. And we have to go back to, in this case, it's probably going to be easiest to go back to this particular equation right here to test our values. There's no simplified factored version of this that's going to make it easy to test our values. So let's go back to that one. Okay, so let's test something to the left of our first value, something in this region out here. Well, we said that that's approximately negative 0.8, so let's put a negative 1 in. Seems like that's probably the easiest thing to do. Let's put a negative 1 into our equation here, and we're going to see if it gives us a true statement or not. So let's see. If I do 4 times negative 1 squared plus 2 times negative 1 minus 1 is less than or equal to 0. So negative 1 squared is 1, so that's 4 times 1, which is 4. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2, and then minus 1. So ultimately, what we get is 4 minus 2 minus 1. 4 minus 2 is 2, minus 1 is 1. So I get a statement that says 1 is less than or equal to 0. Well, that's not true. That's a false statement. So that does not help me out at all. So this is out. Don't want that section. Let's try something in between. Let's try 0, because 0 is in between negative 0.8 and 0.3. 0 will be the easiest one for us to figure out. So if we plug in 0, we get 4 times 0 squared plus 2 times 0 minus 1 is less than or equal to 0. Well, anything times 0 is 0. So that's 0. That's 0. That's minus 1. So I get negative 1 is less than or equal to 0. That's true. I like that. Negative 1 is less than 0. So this section right here is good. So let's try one more. Let's try the outside section, because we got to try all of them. So we're going to try that piece out there, and anything bigger than 0.3 will work. Well, you could certainly use 0.4 if you wanted to, but that's not an easy number to deal with. Let's just use 1. As a matter of fact, I'm going to bring the 1 way over to the left here. So we're going to do 4 times 1 squared plus 2 times 1 minus 1 is less than or equal to 0. 1 squared is 1, so 4 times 1 is 4. 2 times 1 is 2. Minus 1 is less than or equal to 0. So 4 plus 2 is 6, minus 1 is 5. So our statement says that 5 is less than or equal to 0. Well, again, that is false. It's definitely not true. So I do not want that section. So I'm only concerned with this middle yellow section right here. I'm only, oops, that's supposed to be yellow. There we go. I'm only concerned with that. That is my solution. And remember that I said we have to go back to the original. We do need to include both of our cut points, or both of our boundary points here, because of that equal sign. So my final answer to this one is everything in between those two boundary points. So my solution is that negative 1 minus square root of 5 over 4 up to negative 1 plus the square root of 5 over 4, and I have to include both of my endpoints. And that is the solution to that particular problem.